Hello and welcome back to my Map Your Memoir outline process videos. These are 5 steps that I think you need to take to map your memoir outline, to write an outline for your memoir before you start to write it. And you can also use this when you're revising. These steps are going to ensure that you have a validated story idea, that you have clarified your audience, that you know where to start the story, and that you have a very good framework for approaching it. It's also going to, the one that I'm going to talk about today is going to ensure that you have enough to sustain a book length work. So whatever your topic or theme for your memoir, it needs to be able to be sustained for 80,000 to 100,000 words. So it needs to be quite juicy. You can't just say, oh, well, I had a really nice holiday in Bali. That's not a topic for a memoir unless it has what I'm going to explore today in in this 4th step of your outline. Okay, so in case this is the first video that you've seen, my name's Louisa DC. I'm a memoir writing teacher, a memoir writing coach, an editor, and I'm also a twice published author. Both of my books were memoirs. I love memoir as a genre. I love to teach it. I love to write it. And before I published both my books, I worked as a freelance journalist and editor for probably 15 to 20 years. So I was pitching stories and I was also receiving story pitches when I was an editor. So I see a lot about what works and what doesn't work in nonfiction. Okay, so let's get to this 4th step today. And this is really the engine that's going to keep your story running for a whole book. And like I said, if you just have a light topic or something that, was just enjoyable and that you just want to write about for your kids, perhaps it might not be valid for a complete book length memoir if you can't identify this. Okay, so this is quite challenging, and it wasn't until my first memoir was rejected for publication that I discovered this really essential thing was missing from the manuscript. And that is the 2 desires. Okay, so I call it the 2 desires, but you could also call it the 2 goals. So there's the conscious desire and the unconscious desire. Now the thing about memoir, and this is where you're going to find your conflict as well, because you need conflict in any story, even if your memoir is about a positive topic, such as a holiday in Bali. You're going to need to identify some kind of conflict or it will not be compelling. So the thing about memoir is most of the conflict is internal, unless it's a very action-based memoir. Perhaps you were training for a marathon or a fight, a physical fight. But for the most part, a lot of memoir, I'd say 80%, the conflict is internal, because it's by genre definition is an exploration of our memories and our experiences, which is a very internal process. Okay, so the 2 desires, these are your conscious desire and your unconscious desire. Now, probably the easiest way for me to explain what this means is to give you an example. So I just finished reading Made by Stephanie Land, which I also referenced in, I think, the first video here in this series. Now, that is a fantastic memoir about surviving in America, on minimum wage, and as a single mum. She was working as a housekeeper, a cleaner. Now, I would say the conscious desire in Stephanie Land's Made was to survive. It's clear from the beginning of that book that she's fighting to survive. She starts the story in a homeless shelter. But the reason that you need to also identify, and most writers only identify this conscious desire, and it can be quite superficial if you only explore that in your memoir. But the unconscious desire is really, really important, because that's going to give you enough conflict in the second part of the story to sustain the reader's interest. So I would say that her unconscious desire, and I haven't spoken to Stephanie about this, but from reading that book, the unconscious desire was to thrive. She didn't want to just survive. One day she wanted to not be working as a maid. She wanted to have her own big house that her kids could run around in. She didn't want to have, back-breaking work every day of the week. So why I call it the unconscious desire is because it's often that thing that we're too afraid to admit until we have achieved the conscious desire. But it's also, it's so necessary for the book, because if you don't have a goal, the reader will not be invested in your story. And if you're following the 3-act story structure, you will probably attain that conscious goal somewhere near the end of the 2nd act at the top, or the beginning of the 3rd act. But why would anyone keep reading if you don't have an unconscious desire that also gets kind of clarified around that time? The answer is they won't. In some memoirs, I think Inheritance by Dani Shapiro, I think she attains the conscious desire really early, so even in the 1st act. So you really need to identify these 2 desires, or like me with Love and Other U-Turns before that was published, before I reshaped the manuscript. And gosh, I wish I'd put this in the outline from the get-go. I could have saved years of agony. Is you need to identify your 2 desires. Okay, so if you need some help with this, I'm holding a live workshop next week, and I can give you a little bit of feedback at the end of the workshop. We've got a Q&A time. It's a 2.5-hour workshop. Because sometimes I find that in my own experience, unless I could clarify with someone these 5 points, I wasn't quite sure if I was getting it right. So I'm holding that workshop next week, and you're very welcome to attend. I'll put the link in the comments. If you're watching this after the workshop has been held, don't worry, the 5th step is in the next video, and hopefully you've got enough to go with from just these 5 points that I'm sharing with you in these videos to outline your memoir. Okay, yeah, I'll see you in the next video.